by Woody Shaw, Sunship, Dizzy, and John Kahn. Dedicated to pursuing a piece of our cultural heritage through interviews with my music heroes, this is The Jake Feinberg Show. Welcome everybody inside the Parisi Palace, high above 2919 East Broadway. This is The Jake Feinberg Show, ushering in a new year here at KEVT Power Talk 1210 a.m. Happy New Year, happy holidays to everybody out there. It's great to be back at Power Talk 1210. And I got to tell you, one of my newest sponsors, Craig Pretzinger from Allstate Insurance. You want to talk about customer service? I just rubbed this woman in the parking lot of the Chase Bank. Minimal, nothing, no damage, nothing. And, it was a new car, and, she wanted my insurance card, so be it. We're hoping to resolve it outside, and called Craig, and he was just right on top of things. And, that's why if I was with Geico, I'd be up the creek without a paddle. So we love you, Pretzinger, and thank you so much for being a sponsor for the Jake Feinberg Show. Without further ado, I want to welcome in one of the greatest singers and artists in our country's history, Billy Vera. Welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Hey, Jake, how are you?
Yeah, great to hear your voice, man. How are you? Happy New Year.
Thank you. Happy New Year to you.
Can you talk about the first time that you it dawned on you that you were begging and borrowing and stealing from everybody like a good thief, but when you kind of realized you had to find your own individual voice? Do you remember when that occurred?
Well, boy, that's a good question. Nobody's ever asked me that one before.
Welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Yeah, man. Well, like everybody else, I would singing along with the records that I heard, and I loved Ray Charles, I loved Frankie Lyman, I loved Jesse Belvin, and of course I couldn't sound like anybody else, so I just sang the way I sang, and the way I felt, and it sort of came out like me. But later on, I began to realize that all the great people, whether they were singers or saxophone players or actors or whatever they were, the ones that were real that I really admired most were the ones that didn't sound like anybody else. So I was kind of glad that I didn't try to copy anybody.
What can you say to the to younger generations of musicians and singers about we're living through the this YouTube generation, full interconnection. All the musicians that I interview essentially develop their own individual sounds, in their own, whether they were drummers, but you can tell it's very distinctive.
Yeah.
And what would be your advice to cats now who are deluged by information? How would you, what kind of advice would you give them as far as carving out their own voice?
Well, you got to try to find it, and just try to play or sing what you feel. I did great studies of Ray Charles, for example, and I wrote liner notes to about 8 or 9 of his CDs, and I won a Grammy for one of them. So I know his work pretty well, and over the years I began to notice that, if I listened carefully, I could, especially in the early years, in the very early years, he was trying to copy Nat Cole and Charles Brown, and he did a very good job of it.
Mm-hmm, you're right, yeah.
But when he went to Atlantic Records, he was still barely a teenager, barely out of his teens. And even on his Atlantic years, I could hear the change in him. And I could hear on piano, I could hear a Sonny Thompson lick, or I could hear a Horace Silver lick, or so I saw where he was getting certain things, but he put them in there in his own way. And then when he he played on that Guitar Slim record, The Things I Used to Do, that he also arranged. From that point forward, Ray started to sing in a more passionate gospel style that became the Ray Charles that we came to know. And he wasn't trying to copy Slim, or maybe he was, but he I don't think he was. It didn't come out like Slim, you know. But he had Slim's passion and he had Slim's gospel fervor. But it came out as Ray too. So I think that's where he really found it. But I used to get a kick out of, you know, saying, well, this is where he got that piano lick or that one, you know.
You but just, you know, and I love, I have not touched a lot on Ray. I know there was, I've known some cats that played in his band, but you know, like, can you talk about a moment earlier in your career where you were fighting it a little bit, you were facing some adversity, and how you overcame it? Because you really delved into the soul music and the rock music quite a bit, obviously, and but those were also, I mean, you were also trying to carve your own path, and I have to believe that there were some interesting times, and I'd like you to share one about, I mean, one of the L's on my show is life, and what I mean by that is overcoming adversity, and I was hoping you could talk about that.
Well, luckily I was always a hard worker. I was a believer in hard work, and gigs were easier to come by in those days. They didn't pay a lot, but they were easy to come by.
And the cost of living wasn't as high.
No, but in my early years, I worked 6 nights a week with the band. I hopped on the train in the morning and went down to the city and had a songwriting gig with a publisher. And on Saturdays, I worked in a record store, where in those days you would play records for the customers. So I was always working, but the first years I was out on my own, I lived in a real crummy one room, in a real crummy building, small building, where I had no heat, I had no plumbing. I had to take my dry cleaning plastic and tape it on the window to keep the winter cold out. and my bathroom was a bedpan that I bought in the drugstore. And then in the morning I would take a shower I would empty it and take my shower up in the landlady's bathroom, where her criminal son kept a monkey in the shower.
Oh, I love this. Is the Billy Vera stories that I want to hear. This is fantastic. But I mean,
so I'd be showering away monkey dew before I got in the morning. You know? So those were a couple of rough years, you know. But you know, you get through them. You get through them.
How did you get through them?
Well, I wrote a couple of hits and sang a couple of hits, and so I made a little more money, that I was able to live a little better.
Let's just back up for a minute, though. You wrote a hit, right? But when you were writing it, you weren't writing it to make a hit, right?
Well, yes and no. You know, I mean, you always wanted to, when you write songs, you always wanted to hear them on the radio. I mean, especially when you're young.
Sure.
You know, that's a thrill, man. The first time you hear yourself on the radio, it's just, wow. You know, if you're in the car, you turn up the radio and open the windows, and you and your friends are yelling, that's us, man. You know,
I love it. Yeah, no, but yeah. I mean, like, I just look at it from an artistic point of view. You know, if you go in with the idea of saying, I got to make a hit, then I don't think much good is going to come of it. You know, I mean, there's an organic process to it, and I think that was the case for you as well.
Well, I was a bit of a snob, you know, musically, and so I wanted to write things that didn't sound like anybody else's songs, or if they did, I wanted to make mine a little bit different. So I'd throw in a different chord that wasn't the the usual thing you would hear in a dopey rock and roll song. You know, I like in a, I mean, the first record I ever made, I remember it was in the key of F, and at the end of the bridge, I threw in an A flat, which, you know, people would say, "What the heck was that?" but it made the song a little different, you know.
Oh, absolutely.
And then the first song I ever actually took to a publisher, I was trying to write a song for this new girl singer named Dionne Warwick that I had heard.
Sure.
Not knowing that Backrack and David had her all tied up. And so I took a couple of songs to this publisher, and you know, and he liked two of them, and they gave me $35 a piece for them and paid for the demos that we made. And so a couple of weeks later, he calls me up and he says, I got a record on one of your songs, and you know. I said, well, who? I wasn't expecting anybody with any name. I figured a B-side or something because I was new. And he said, well, I said, which song? I said, Mean Old World. I said, oh, did you get that girl Dionne Warwick on it? He said, no, I couldn't get her, but I got Ricky Nelson. I said, Ricky Nelson, he's white. You know?
Right.
He said, well, you ungrateful little putz. He said, Ricky's going to do your song 5 weeks in a row on Ozzie and Harriet's show, you know, and so with that kind of exposure, you're virtually guaranteed a hit. And sure enough, it was. So that's beginner's luck, I'll tell you that.
Well, I mean, you've been rolling Snake Eyes for the last 5 decades, man. It just, you know, I will be honest, Bill. I mean, Billy, to get into your discography and your background, I mean, you're one of the heaviest cats I never knew about. I mean, it really. I mean, I'm just gonna say that right now. I want to play a piece of music right now for you, and then we'll come back and break it down. Okay?
Okay, cool.
You've got your word, and I've got mine, and it's a shame. Two grown-up words that will never be the same. Can't we be like storybook children, running through the rain, hand in hand, across the meadow? In a wonderland where nothing's planned for tomorrow. You've got his ring, you've got his heart, and you've got his baby. And it's too late to turn away, start all over again. Why can't we be like storybook children and run on?
Music on the Jake Feinberg Show, brought to you in part by the aforementioned Craig Pretzinger of Allstate Insurance. Just a hands-on cat, literally just rubbed somebody's bumper in a parking lot, and I had to call him right away, and he put me at ease. Craig Pretzinger of Allstate Insurance, phenomenal service, and we appreciate his support on the Jake Feinberg Show. All right, Mr. Vera. I know you know what that song is. Although that version of Storybook Children sounded like you solo and not with Judy Clay. Am I correct?
Yeah, that was a remake that I did, I don't know, about 8 or 9 years later in Nashville.
I dig it. Who do you have any idea who the Session Cats were? Was it the Swampers? I mean, it had a real kind of gut bucket sort of soul Southern fried feel to it.
Well, it was Pig Robbins, who's on the acoustic piano,
All right.
and Pete Drake, the famous steel players on steel, and the guitarist was Pete Wade, and on bass was my bass player that we brought down with me, a young fellow named Tommy Woke, who later became famous as T-Bone Woke with Hall & Oates.
Is he still with us?
No, Tommy died a couple of years ago. He was doing a session with Daryl Hall and came home and had a heart attack and died. Young fella.
Can you?
Wonderful musician.
I mean, you're blowing my mind right now, man. Can you talk? I mean, for someone I'm 37 years old, we see a lot of things going on in our society as it relates to cultural bias and the treatment of human beings. It says that it was a groundbreaking decision by Chip Taylor to put you and Judy Clay together. But looking back on it, can you talk about the significance of the two of you collaborating and then ultimately winding up with, Lord knows I can't even imagine those bills. I mean, I maybe it was Billy Vera, Coltrane, and the Isley Brothers. I don't know, at the Apollo Theater. Unbelievable stuff. I just wanted you to take me through looking with the perspective of the significance of you and Judy Clay.
Well, the irony of it is that we didn't really see it as trying to make any kind of a cultural breakthrough. We just were trying to find the right voice to blend with mine. In fact, when we originally wrote the song, it was just a simple adultery song.
Right.
Which was, I'm not proud to say it was one of the first adultery songs that set off a whole trend for those things. But we took the demo up. We had made the demo with a girl who I won't name. Her name won't mean anything.
Sure.
But we took the demo up to Jerry Wexler at Atlantic Records, and because Chip and I had already had a hit with Barbara Lewis on Atlantic called "Make Me Belong to You." So we played this demo for Jerry Wexler, and he pounded his fist on the desk, and he said, "Man, that's a smash." He said, "But get rid of the girl in the demo, and I'll record you on Atlantic with this song, this great song." So we went back to the office, and I said, "Well, I'm friendly with Patti LaBelle and the Bluebells, who were on Atlantic at the time. I played guitar for them a whole bunch of times."
Cool.
And we were pretty friendly, and one of the girls in the group, Nona Hendricks, had a voice that I thought would blend well. So I called her in Philadelphia and asked her if she wanted to make a record with me. So she came up and we recorded it. But their manager got in on the act, and he was afraid that she'd quit the group if we had a hit. So he wouldn't allow it. So then we had to audition about 20 more girls, and most of them sounded like they should be singing Broadway show tunes. It didn't quite fit. And then finally Jerry suggested Judy Clay. He said that we just signed her to Stax, which they were distributing. Stax was distributed by Atlantic at the time. So he said, "Why don't you give her a listen?" So she came in, and she was a rather large woman, and she was about 14 months pregnant, and had a big chip on her shoulder because she had come out of the Drink Art Singers, which was the group that Dionne and Dee Dee Warwick were in, and Cissy Houston was in, and Dionne and Dee Dee's mother, Lee, was her group. And Judy was the lead singer. That's how good a singer Judy was. So she sang, and we just loved her voice. And then when she left, they said, "Well, what do you think, man? I mean, can you handle that attitude?" I said, "Oh, yeah. Because I recognized there was a scared little girl underneath all that. so we recorded it with Judy, and we remained friends to the end of her life. And she sang it great, and the record came out, and unlike most records, ours broke in New York, because usually they break out of town. And when the record ended up being number one in New York on the R&B charts, and number 3, I think, on the pop charts in New York. And we got an offer to play the Apollo. So great. I said, that was a dream of mine. My 2 big dreams as a kid was to play the Apollo and to be on American Bandstand. I didn't get on Bandstand until about 20 years later. But anyway, we get to the Apollo for rehearsal. It was, in those days, it was 7 days a week, 5 shows a day. And the first show was like 10:30 in the morning on Friday, and you rehearsed Thursday night after the last show over the previous week. So Honey Coles, the great dancer, was the theater manager, and he said, listen, the Apollo hasn't seen you yet, because they hadn't seen our picture. And he said, what I want you to do is that Judy, you enter from stage right, and Billy, you enter from stage left, and you let her take 3 steps onto the stage before you make your entrance, and watch what happens. So I did that, and I heard 1,500 people gasp, and they said, "That's him! That's him!" They couldn't believe that it was me.
Yeah.
And we went over really great, and he wasn't sure how we were going to go over, So he had put us on second, which is a lousy spot on the show. So after the first show, he came up to our dressing room. He said, "I'm changing up the show." He said, "I'm going to put you all on before the star, because ain't nobody going to follow you two." And so that became our spot. And if you go up to the Apollo today, our picture is still in the lobby there. So I guess we meant something to Harlem,
Can
the world.
Can you talk a little bit about the difference between cutting a hit in the studio and then going to the Apollo and playing a week at a time with a hired rhythm section? Do you have any idea who played? I mean, if they're speeding up the tempo, the differences between the live format versus the studio setting? Just take Storybook Children, for instance, at the Apollo.
Well, they had a house band there led by Reuben Phillips, and I decided to bring my own guitar player and bass player for the tempos and the conducting and that stuff. And they were all good readers, all the house band. They could read anybody's music, and they were all guys that played on sessions. So their band was wonderful, and so the music was never ever a problem.
Is there, part of my show delves into the metaphysical, and I was hoping that you could talk about a time when you left your physical body while performing, and actually transcended. The music was so powerful that you kind of you left your body.
Well, I will tell you, the only time I can remember something that profound happening on stage was some years later, and it was in a real down period of my career in the 70s. I just couldn't, after we had that success in the late 60s, in the 70s, the music and the culture of the country had changed quite a lot. And I just couldn't figure out how to fit in. I had been working in the black theaters and in that part of the world, and so I went home and moved in with my mother, and I put together a little trio, and we were playing, just local yokel clubs. And I fell in love with this girl, and we were together for about a year. and she was real young. You know, she was like 20 years old, and you know, like any 20-year-old, she moved on, and I was crushed for the first time in my life. And one night on stage, I went out of my body. I was having visions of her, you know, on stage, man, and it was pretty scary. But I will tell you another story.
Yeah.
This happened some years later, after I'd moved to L.A., and I'd put together Billy and the Beaters, and we had a hit called "I Can Take Care of Myself." And the follow-up record only went up to the bottom of the lower end of the charts. And in the meantime, I had a bunch of songs on TV shows and movies, and I'd appeared in some movies and TV shows. I was sort of eking out a living as an actor. You know, thanks to Chip's brother, John Voight, had put me in an acting class with him, dragged me to an acting class with him. So I got a movie gig, a movie called Blind Date, Bruce Willis and Kim Basinger, and the band was in there. And I was getting ready to move. My mother was dying of cancer, and she gave me an advance on my inheritance, a down payment on a house. So I was getting ready to move, and there was this old lady that used to live across the courtyard, and I used to see her out in the sun talking to people in front of her apartment. And I'd run into her sometimes in the deli that was across the alley from my building when I'd get my sandwich in the afternoon. So I said to her one day, I said, well, we're not going to be meeting. You know how you flirt with old ladies just to make them feel good. And I said, we're not going to meet anymore like this, you know. She said, I know, you're going to be very happy in your new house. And I looked at her, and she said, oh, you don't know, I'm a psychic. I don't do it for a living. I don't take money for it, but you're in show business, aren't you? I said, well, yeah. She said, you write songs. I said, yeah. She said, well, I see a song that you wrote on TV, and it's going to be successful beyond your wildest dreams. And I said, well, I got a couple of songs coming out in a movie. She said, no, I don't see it in a movie. I see this on television. I said, well, she said, it was a song you wrote 9 years ago. That's how specific she was.
Wow.
She said, you didn't finish it right away. It took you about a year to finish the song. And that could only be one song, because I usually finish a song in one day. And I said, well, I know the song you're talking about, but that was on TV last year. She said, no, I see it in the very near future. So, that was the end of the conversation pretty much. And 2 weeks later, Family Ties or reused At This Moment.
Oh, my God.
In the episode where the girl breaks up with Michael J. Fox. And, of course, it was, as she said,
wow,
successful beyond my wildest dreams.
Unbelievable. Billy, Vera. Billy, can we pick this up either, maybe in February? I'd love to do part 2 with you. This is not enough time, man. I mean, it has just been an honor to connect with you, but I don't even think we even started to scratch the surface.
Sure, anytime you want, my brother.
Thank you, brother, man, and Happy New Year. We'll be in touch, and I'll get a copy of this out to you as soon as possible.
Okay, beautiful, Jake.
All right.
Congratulations on your show, and Happy New Year again.
Hey, you too, man. Love
Say
always.
hello to Evie for me.
I will.